Hello and welcome back to Alchemy with Sheeana Leigh. We're on episode number 6, and I'm super excited to bring you a beautiful friend that I have met through social media, but I feel like we're connected in many other ways now, and introduce you to her and her work and her world because it's very delicious. And yeah, this is Lisa Moriah. And we are going to be diving into the realm of somatic sound healing today. So I would love to, first and foremost, before we dive in and get super raw and real on the voice and the throat chamber and how it activates our entire body, I'd love for
Yeah.
you to introduce yourself to this lovely community and say hello.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And it's such a joy to be here. I am a shamanic priestess, a sound healer, and a sales and marketing coach, which might not seem on the surface like they go together, but they actually do because the body and the voice, especially for women, the body and the voice are so involved in all three of those areas. Shamanic practice is so much about the body and the land and reconnecting those. Sound healing, of course, we have voices in our bodies. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. And then with sales and marketing, it really is a form of vocal healing, I find,
Yeah.
especially in the early years of business and learning how to allow our bodies to become like this channel and chamber for what's passing through us that wants to be shared with the world. And then how do we ask? How do we receive? How do we communicate our value? All of those things. And my overall sort of umbrella for my work is the Temple of Divine Radiance, which is a name that came to me several years ago, and then out of that came the School of Divine Radiance, which is where I house, all the various aspects of my work. But the funny thing is, I got super connected to this land in southeastern Turkey where there used to be an old temple of the moon god called Sin or Nana. And there was what might have been a priestess house in that temple called the House of the Radiance of Heaven. And when I found out about that, I just thought it was so interesting because the radiance of heaven is like divine radiance, essentially, to me anyway. And so I was like, wow, apparently I was connecting with this land and the ancestors long before I ever got here. So I smile every time I think about that now.
I am really lit up. That was such a delicious introduction, and I'm so honored to have you in this space because for podcast purposes, I'm obviously keeping quiet, but on the YouTube, you'll see me like cheering you on and agreeing to everything you said and just like frothing for you to be here because your work is so important and so needed. And I'm just like deeply like in a bow of reverence that you do this. And there is a thread there, absolutely, of the interconnection with like the throat chamber and marketing and the land and,
Yeah.
pleasure and embodiment. And it is one of the areas that I don't feel is spoken about enough or only surface levels and layers is coming out now of like unlocking the throat to unlock your body. But that is like a really core key chamber that gets blocked in women, and then they can't speak their needs, they can't speak their desires, they don't even know what they are, and then it just is a flow-on effect. So I would love for you to talk about a little bit about what is somatic sound healing authentically to you and like this organic frequency and tone within your own voice and how that shifts and changes your whole chamber of body. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, for a really long time in my work, I used to tell people, I don't know, I teach, but I don't think I have a healing modality. And I didn't realize the whole time I was using my voice and I was encouraging other people to use their voices. And then one day I realized that was the modality
Yeah.
for a huge part of it, and the connection between that and the body. So that's why I call it somatic sound, because most of the healing work that I do, and then a lot of the work we do in courses and programs and things, even if it's related to, say, goddess history or something that might seem more cerebral on the surface, but is like really related to women's wholeness and kind of like reintegrating all of these things, there's still a sound component that comes from the body. And that's what somatic sound really is. It's sound from your own body. And I do drum. I'm in a program now for Turkish music therapy, so I'm going to be learning a bunch of new instruments. So
Amazing.
traditional music is important, but at the end of the day, every person has a voice. We all have this healing tool within us. And so this somatic sound, the sound we generate in our own body, actually has endless healing qualities and capacities. And I realized when I was teaching, I was transmitting, but that somatic sound was actually healing me. Like I heal and transform and grow through everything I transmit and teach. And then when we would chant together, or I bring some other vocal sound exercise or something, and everyone was doing it together, people will tell me, oh my goodness, light language is coming through, or I'm getting, visualizations of answers to questions I had about something in my life, or something just passed out of my womb and it's been healed. And they would thank me for it, but then I would say to them, well, you did that.
Yeah.
You did it with your voice,
Yeah.
in your body. And that's the powerful thing is we don't realize, I mean, our body is like a resonating chamber. So when the sound is passing through, I mean, technically it's the throat, but the sound goes into the whole body. And we don't realize that when we're toning, chanting, singing, the frequencies from that are filling the whole body. And the more you do it, the more attuned you become to where else that vibration is feeling in the body. It's very interesting. And then you can actually kind of, choose different sounds or choose different combinations or even sacred mantras or things. And I use a lot of like scriptural texts or things out of Abrahamic religion because I feel like people don't tend to see those as mantras, but for people raised in those traditions, they actually, certain ones actually can be. So we
Mm.
can take those and then we're actually passing that through the body. And then the sound becomes like this embodied healing tool. And it's no longer just in the head, like, let me sing this song. It's got pretty lyrics. It's about what is that doing in my body? How is it reorganizing me at a cellular level? How is it changing me? And in the immediate, that's kind of the cerebral side, but in the immediate moment, how much calmer do I feel? How much more relaxed? How much more grounded? How much more open to sensuality and pleasure? Because now I've dropped into the moment and I'm not in the past or the future in regret or worry. So I'm able to experience pleasure, all of these kinds of things.
That was so good. And I really want to highlight that embodied healing tool because I am such a firm believer, and you said this in our messages exchanging as well, is the original text is from the body. Like, so I am such a firm believer of power of the body and like the temple of the body, and really reminding people of their own power and their own medicine, and I think we're moving into a place where we're coming out of sort of that guru culture that we've been riding along, where you do go and see like these sound healers and shamanic healers, and they're up there and they're singing and they're dancing and they're doing all these incredible things. And the power is really placed on them, but it's like the power is always within you to, even though you're listening to those frequencies and that vibration, you do have your authentic voice, like you said, and your authentic sound, which does create a vibration in your body that creates, and I use the sound a lot, obviously, in pleasure because I believe that pleasure is a like delicious tool to release. And
Yes.
this sound that I make in those moments is quite like cathartic and releasing as well. And like that just comes from within. And so like that is like the message I want to give everybody. And like I want to sing a lot of to people and women to unlock this element within themselves and this chamber within themselves to experience like true liberation and freedom. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. And you mentioned about pleasure. And I mean, the voice and the yoni are connected. I
Yes, they
mean, especially
are.
by the vagus nerve, right? So
Mhm.
anything we're doing with our throats, which has the inverse effect as well,
Yeah.
that if it's constant, if we're constantly down on ourselves, down on our situation, or if what we're singing, not that, I have any particular judgment against a certain kind of music, but if what we're constantly singing and expressing lyrically is life is terrible or all these terrible things have happened to me, there can be catharsis in that. But if it's like all that, then that may actually be sending something else down to the yoni, which might actually be contributing to blockage rather than to
Agreed.
healing. And so then there's that process of just discerning and like what and becoming discerning of like what do I want to say, what do I want to express, because there's always vibration going on with that self-expression, and also what do I want to sing, chant, hum, tone, that is going to have the effect I actually want to have on that part of my body, especially if we're in a phase of life where we're healing a lot down there. And I have been there. I mean, I to the point where like I couldn't even have, normal sexual or sensual pleasure because of a clinical problem that I had. And
Mhm.
no one ever talked to me about, what are the embodied ways to open this up. It was just always, well, there's this therapy or do this thing, or there's this, clinical modality, all of which had value and I used them. But I wish I had known, hey, this right here is connected to this down here.
Right? Right? Same. I feel that so deeply. And it's still what they're talking about now. Like we see it a lot on social media, like it's coming to light, seeing sort of the networks and the fascia and the way that it is designed on the surface layer, how they're interconnected and much the same. But it's just like the energetic frequency of that as well. Like I find that, they're both these like channels and opening to the internal and external realm. And like I find that if either one of them is blocked or suffocated, which with most women it is, and shut down, it's like a pressure valve within our body,
Yeah.
and it's like if it's closed up and shut off, and there's this pressure valve pressing it down, there's no wonder we have a world full of like extreme like prolapse and all of these things because everything's being pushed down and forced down. And when you start to look at the energetic thread that weaves them together, it's like a no-brainer. You're like, oh my God, everything clicks into
Mhm.
place. And you're like, wow, I can do these practices, these sound practices that actually open and soften and relax and heal. And I just think that is like the magic and the medicine of women that we are just learning about and tapping into in this new way of being, basically.
It
Yeah.
is so true. And it's so needed right now because, as you said, you see this all the time in your practice. I see it all the time in mine. People coming through, women especially, who just are like, I've had all of these physical issues, or just with sensory challenges, or challenges with experiencing pleasure. I want more. Like there's that desire that, what is it? Michael Beckwith always says the will of the divine is for a greater expression of life. Like there's a desire for a greater expression of life with that pleasure and sensuality. And I think there's an innate knowing in us as women that somehow like being tapped into that is going to change so many other aspects of our lives, even if no one's ever said that and we haven't read any of the clinical evidence or any of the shamanic evidence or anything on any end of the spectrum for like why that actually is. There's still something inside of us that knows. Like I remember periods of my journey where before I got, into all of this sound work and different things where I just remember thinking, like, if I die and I have not experienced the opening of my body, I will have missed something that was meant for me in this lifetime. And having come out on the other side of that now, I'm like, oh my goodness, yes, because opening that became an opening for so many other things that wanted to come through.
Yes, absolutely. I believe, oh, that just sends chills down my body. Like if I had have died without opening my body, and that is like, because once you journey through that, and then once you start to feel the soft opening of your body and really start, and it's not just about like these extreme orgasm, but it's all of life, all of creation. You're opening yourself up to like intuition, like deep connection, like deep knowing, like trust, safety, like all of these elementals that we are is our birthright as women, right? And if we are closed off to our body and closed off to parts and decompartmentalize it, we cannot be open to the full like eros of life dripping through us. And I think that that is like a key takeaway when doing this work, when working on the sound, when working on the throat. Like it's not just one thing. It's like interconnected with allowing, satiating and all that is, which is our human right, and not
It
making it
is.
icky, like not making it like shadowy and delving into the realms of like, insatiable in the way. Yeah.
Yes, it's so true. It's so true. I mean, I can definitely say from my journey that the time when I saw real change in so many areas of my life was when I joined a priestess program and we started chanting all the time. And it wasn't like chant had not been a huge part of my life. I always liked to sing, but chant hadn't been, atoning and things like that hadn't been a huge part of my life up to that point. And I remember thinking like, well, this feels good, but what is it really doing? Because I was still very
Yeah.
much in, in the like, show me the evidence and does this really work? Like, I don't know why I was in that space if I joined a priestess program, but what's whatever where I was at.
The paradox of
But
life, huh?
paradox of life. But then all of a sudden things started coming through, and I mentioned it to my teacher. I'm like, a lot of good things have been coming through, and she's like, well, you opened your voice. And that's opening so many other parts of you, and even the parts of you you can't see in your energy field and things like that, your aura.
Mhm.
It's recalibrating you. And then I started to see the connection. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something to this. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to ask you, if anybody what is the biggest thing you've seen in your line of work that shows women or sh like that allows them to see that they're actually like blocked in this channel? Have you seen like signs and symptoms, and what does it usually look like for women? And then if that's the case, how do you sort of work with them to start? How can they work with themselves even to sort of start unblocking and working with their own voice medicine in this way?
Oh, it's such a great question. And I feel like my answer is going to be specific to a certain kind of woman because that's who comes to me.
Hmm.
And so this might not be the process for everyone, but I'm sure people, even who are not in this particular niche, may resonate with elements of it. So that's a disclaimer. But generally, I find women are coming to me, and there's like one of two things going on. Either they recognize already that there's a block with the voice, like, I've realized I can't speak my real truth. I can't get it out of my mouth. Something else always comes out. Or there's like, I feel like someone's choking me. I've nearly choked on food multiple times in the last few months because something's so tight in my voice. That happened to me right before my healing journey started. I actually had the
Interesting.
Heimlich done on me several times over a multi-month period because, and that never happened to me before. I never had trouble chewing and swallowing food, like what was going on, but the block was so tight at that point. So I hear that a lot also reflected back. Just women saying, I feel like if I could ask for what I want, my life would be totally different. So there's a lot of that, of noticing that there's like the fact that there's a challenge or there's a block has registered
Mhm.
in their lives. They're feeling the pain of it. The other piece is they come to me and they're like, Psst, I'm from a religious background and I feel called by the goddess. And that's not a thing. And it's interesting because that sounds more, again, in the mind, it's like, well, this theology or this, entity of the divine feminine, but actually it's tied to the voicelessness. Because what they don't realize yet a lot of times is that the inability to speak about the feminine in the most elevated terms and as an aspect of the source consciousness, that we can engage with in these different, archetypes and things. It's like it's not just that it's not there in, say, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's that very often in traditional religion, not always, but very often, there is a specific like, don't talk about that. Like I remember when I first started going down the goddess path, I couldn't get the word goddess out of my mouth aloud. And I was like, but I talk about everything, but I couldn't talk about that. So a lot of times her drawing of them onto this journey is going to reveal the block of the voice because they're going to realize, oh, there's a whole set of feminine spiritual things or things related to my body, like where my menstruation and my spiritual practice might, for example, interconnect or something that it's like, don't talk about that. And it's all related to the suppression of the feminine within, not in all ways, but in ways that relate to divinity or that which is like super elevated, within these traditions. And so the journey to like find her, like, do I have a mother? Do I have a divine mother in my spirituality? And if not, how do I find one?
Yeah.
Tends to then reveal. So that's the other path they come in. So that's kind of what I see in terms of how people come. And in terms of what we do, to be honest, I mean, there can be many different protocols, but a lot of it, since I do a lot of group work or workshops and things like that, or teach a lot, it's just getting voices to start opening
Yeah.
with chant. And something that feels safe. And especially if they come from a religious background and I'm sharing with them a text that actually has goddess component to it, but they didn't know that before, right? Or there's a connection to the divine feminine and we explore that and that gets into here and then kind of soaks into down here as that, the transmission of that comes in energetically. Then we chant it, and then it's like, oh, well, I know this text, or I've sung this, or this is familiar to me, and it's comforting because it's familiar, but I didn't know that it can also connect me in this other way to this elevated essence of the feminine, which I also am and which I also carry, which is part of the wholeness psychologically of the feminine. So a lot of it is just doing that. And then over time, people will come to me and say, I've been to 3 of your events and this has started happening because I kept chanting that chant. Or they'll just notice the effect and then they'll pick up on it, on their own. If I'm working privately with someone, we might do more specific exercises, or I might have a program for them where we just start with pure sound like vowels, and then we move into, chanting texts that they feel comfortable with, like whatever background they come from, or if they prefer Eastern spirituality, they want to chant in Sanskrit or something like that, that's fine. Whatever is unique to their situation. But a lot of times it's just opening the voice. And then they get into the drum, which then also brings in the healing vibrations. And it's not quite in the body, but your body is still heavily engaged, in the creation of that. And then that kind of just spirals from there. And then one day they find themselves talking about things like the goddess that they couldn't talk about before. And then suddenly they're asking for things they couldn't ask for before. And then, there may be friction or explosions in life that happen because of the newly opened voice. And then we navigate that. So,
Yeah. Beautiful. Absolutely. And I think that's something I love and has drawn me to you over years. We've been following each other for years now, I think, and
long
connecting
time. Yeah.
for a while. Is this honoring and reverence for the goddess, like this feminine aspect, which you don't see a lot of people who are followers of Christ, or however you want to, in relationship with God, or with
Yeah.
source, or however you want to name that and box that in. They don't speak about, you always sort of see the left hand and the right hand. It's like it's like goddess culture, tantra, over sexualization in the realm of, if you're following like neo tantra sort of elements, and goddess praise and
Like,
deities, or you're seeing the
mhm.
other path of like strict, Christ Jesus religious. And so I find that you are this like really delicious bridge for me and for many other people that come into your field, I'm assuming,
Mhm.
that is in honor and reverence to both, and not into the extremities of either, and like all is welcome. And I believe that that is like a true embodiment of somebody who's deeply connected to God, to be quite honest, because whatever essence you want to call that, God, source, creation, it's somebody
Who's
that
your
can
favorite?
sit in the gray, right? What of faith, right? And
Yeah.
I actually am starting to see through my pathways and many elements of learning and journeying that there is this powerful element of somebody who can sit in the gray and see all of these sides and aspects and honoring, but still have, you know, I just can't even describe it, because there's not many people in our field of work that can do that yet, right? Like that can bridge the both. And yeah, and like your work is so needed in these realms, and your work is so needed with these women and with our collective. Like I believe, like this is a huge pain point for women. Like you said, they can't speak their needs, they can't speak their desires, they can't speak up for themselves, they can't set boundaries, they can't, and that is just a flow-on effect for what we're seeing in the collective play out, right? Like it is a ripple. So it starts within you and it starts within your body, and it ripples out till we see a land full of women who are disconnected, fragmented, not speaking up for the voiceless, do you know what I mean? Like they're so disempowered. And, I see everything sort of starting to spin around at the moment. So I do feel like that you're going to be a guiding light for a lot of people in this element, and so many others, right? So I would love to ask you, if you don't have anything to add on to that, when you say sort of like opening up the voice and just sort of start, is there like I always talk about this a lot too. Like it's a huge element that I talk about is like a lot of women don't have like an embodied voice, right? Like a lot of people speak from different parts of their body, and you can always tell where people are
Uh,
speaking from and I always believe that we have like an organic womb sound from our womb. I believe that we have like an organic pussy sound, like dropping down and into the body. Like our tone and our frequency is so different than what it is when we're talking up here and we're light and fluff, like dropping it down, breathing in there. It actually is quite a different sound. So, do you have any like hints or tips or like how to get people to start opening up their throat? If they're just beginning and they're like, okay, this has really resonated and sparked something. I want to like play with my voice here and unlock something. Like, how can they do that at home or like by themselves?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think there are a couple things. The first one is something that comes out of a really ancient Kabbalist sound healing technique because the early Kabbalists, so the Jewish mystical rabbis of like the 11th and 12th century in Europe, they were preserving an orally passed mystical tradition that was much older. And they spoke about the gates of the body and sound being like our connection to divine light. We have more divine light in our bodies, the more sound we pass through, all of this. They have these techniques for toning vowel sounds in particular, where you imagine the sound coming from a lower place of the body. So I
Mhm.
think that's a really simple way to start is just like even when I'm speaking to you now, I'm conscious that like I want the sound to come from my solar plexus. I want it to come from my womb space. I want it to be deep down there, but it's not like I'm intentionally lowering my voice. I'm just imagining that I'm projecting the sound from that place, and that helps a lot. Whereas when I get anxious or I'm triggered, a lot of times the sound is coming from up here somewhere, and my breathing is shallow and my voice is higher, and it's faster because it's just not as grounded deep down in. So even just that simple
Mhm.
thing of visualization and starting to pay attention to where you're imagining your own sound coming from can help.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I always teach two sides of the voice. There's the creativity. I mean, there's multiple sides, but to kind of oversimplify it, there's the creativity and the flow of the voice, which is the feminine. And there's the authority and the groundedness of the voice, which in many energetic ways is actually masculine. And in the places where we have wounding with the masculine, and like we don't feel safe with masculine energy, which isn't just men, it can be mission, it can be structure, it can be scheduling, containment, anything that contains and helps to support the flow to be protected. That can feel incredibly unsafe. So what I notice a lot of times is, women will tell me, well, like nobody listens to what I have to say. Like, and what I tell them is what I'm hearing from you is there's no authority in your words. And the authority is that integration of their own masculine to where it's like these words have weight. And so this isn't necessarily a practical solution. It's kind of just more a pointer, as it's
I
like
love
the
it.
healing work with that is going to automatically make you sound like people are going to pay attention, and you're going to notice a shift at some point when you talk. People are going to be like, oh, they may not agree with everything you say. And in fact, you might actually trigger more people
Yeah.
rather than less for a while. But you're going to come to a point where you're like, oh, I can actually like command attention for what I'm saying because I know it's safe for me to command that attention now because I've developed that protection within myself.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that you brought that here. And it just like sparked something within me that I was speaking about with my husband a couple of days ago. We were actually speaking about this. You know, how you said like a lot of women, nobody sort of takes me seriously, or like, I don't speak with authority, or like I don't feel heard. Me and my husband were actually talking about how we've noticed, like, as a collective, a lot of older women will talk like at you and not to you and in conversation. And so we were actually talking about it. I was actually speaking about my
Uh,
mother and my mother, how she talks to me.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, mom. She doesn't listen. She doesn't
Okay.
listen. She thinks I'm crazy. It's okay. And sensitive.
Same.
So she actually has this thing, and it's really dropped into place with me. I've done a lot of healing work around my mother, but it's like she doesn't talk to actually connect and drop into deeper. She just talks at me and just says everything like, and so I tune out. I kind of block it and kind of just sort of sit back because it's penetrative, right? And
Mhm.
my husband was telling me that he finds a lot of women in that generation, because he works with a lot of them out at work, has this thing. And we were reflecting on the wounding of women of that collective, having this wounding where they are not heard and they are not understood. And then it becomes a pain point, and they're not speaking from deep, they're not speaking like authentically or groundedly. It's like it's you can feel the energy. It's and you were talking about it before about that sort of upper heady, sort of anxiousy energy, and that's kind of what you feel from them. It's like this penetrative, like feeling. And so what do you want to do? You want to tune out, you want to block, you don't want to receive that energy. But like
Yep.
you when you start to learn to work with your body and your tone and your voice, and speak with authority from internally, like speaking from your heart hits so much different. And it's not exactly like a tonal thing. It's like you're breathing in there, you're feeling it, you're moving into there, and then the way you speak sort of changes. The energy that people are receiving changes. Then to go even deeper and to speak, like you said, from your solar plexus, from your womb, like deep from like your pelvis, it's all very different and received very different. And when you start to look at that, you can start to really see how this is like a ripple-on effect as well. People not being seen, people not being heard, people deflecting, people, um, one of the wounds I see most in my spaces is women coming up and not feeling heard, not feeling seen, not feeling understood. It's like a number one cause of friction in relationships. He doesn't hear me, he doesn't see me, he doesn't understand me. And it's like
Mhm.
once you start to connect all the threads, you can really see how, somatically learning to heal your throat and your sound and open and release this chamber can change relationships and change the way you experience pleasure and life. And it's just, I'm having this total opening moment right now with you of like how big this truly is, because it is massive, right?
It's so huge. And I love your example of like your mom's generation because when you have a woman who has a lifetime of continually accepting situations where she's not heard and probably not knowing or having all of the tools for how to like cultivate that voice that has the magnetic power or the authority to be heard and to be responded to, that's what happens. It is like the continual, it's almost like knocking on glass, like,
Mm.
hey, you in there, do you hear me? And they want to be heard, right? And I mean, I
Yeah.
think we've all been there at some point in our lives, or maybe for a period of our lives. But it is a completely different thing to go through that healing work and come to the place where you can. And also, I find I go through periodic tests as I'm up leveling. I just went through a series of tests, like the last couple of months have been brutal with this,
Oh,
where people will
fabulous.
come through my life who are doing that to me, like not the tapping on the glass, they're on the other side of the glass, right? Like, and they're not hearing me. And a lot of times when I need to up level my voice, a set of situations will come through. And in manifesting terms, it's usually like oftentimes three situations, separate situations will come through where I'm like, oh, they're not really hearing me. They're not really seeing me. And then the challenge for me then becomes, will I accept living in that space or with that
Ooh.
type of, like with that type of energy? Am I going to accept a relationship where this is the case? I have two choices. Either I can change how I'm communicating and see if that creates the resonance like you were talking about. Or a lot of times it may be a friendship or collaboration or a partnership where it's like simple to just say, you know what, I don't think this is aligned because this person is very much here and like actually listening. As long as I check and make sure I'm listening, right? And like that there is that going on. If it's not coming back the other direction, maybe this is the universe asking me or God asking me, are you ready now to be in a similar partnership or relationship or collaboration where you'll actually be heard?
Mm.
And not just staying in that situation or that connection just because, well, I've known this person for a long time, or we have history, or we've done these projects together, or whatever. and like actually honoring the sanctity of our own voice too, as long as we're doing the healing work, right? We have to do the work on ourselves to see like where we may be contributing to this. But
Yeah.
it can also be a test that's coming in and saying, are you going to accept not being heard? You're going to keep accepting that? Because you accepted that for a long time, and now people are exiting your space who do that and things are better, but oh, here comes a fresh crop.
Yeah.
Are you going to still accept that? And then you have the choice. Either you accept it and then you deal with it, or you say, no, I think it's time that I be in environments where I'm heard. And I'm also doing the work to ensure that I'm communicating in a way where I can be heard.
Oh, I love that you brought that in, to be quite honest with you, because I feel like one of the biggest shifts in my relationship, in my marriage, like the dissolving of my marriage, was just one day we stopped understanding each other. It was like we were talking to each other and neither of us could, it was like we were in two completely different worlds. And it just happened, you know. So I really resonate with that whole story you just shared because I've never been able to explain it to anybody else. People are like, "Oh, how did your relationship dissolve or how did your marriage break down?" And it was just like, well, it's like he's talking, but it's like he's talking a completely different language. Like I cannot see him, hear him, understand him, and I feel deeply seen and unheard. And as soon as I went through that whole portal of letting that go, as you said, it is like a summoning. It is like, are you going to be in this and
Mm.
stay in this? Or are you going to, as soon as I have kind of moved through that sort of death process and releasing and transition, like
Yeah.
my work I has completely blossomed in a new way. Like I have so many more outlets for my voice, this podcast being one of them, the YouTube. There, it completely released something that was hindering me for so long about speaking up and using my own voice that has just shifted and changed my whole business and my passion and my calling and the people that I'm around. And like, I think that that's really important that we place that here as like, yes, like this can happen
It
when you're
can
doing this
happen.
work.
It can. And because I know I went through a phase recently where I was so discouraged, I was thinking, what am I doing wrong? That people who represent the old pattern of kind of like just seeing what they want to see in me, but not really hearing me. This is a big thing with my human design also. I have, unfortunately, the human design chart that's like the Mother Teresa. Not that I'm at all even like going there in comparison, but the type of person that people see as being like able to like really hold vast container, but then they don't actually
100%.
see the person who's doing the holding. And I
Yeah,
just hold this archetypal space for them. But if there's ever a need for them to see me, actually, it doesn't happen. So, like, I was getting a bunch of that energy again after not having it for a while. And I was like, interesting. And then not hearing, and, like I'm talking, but
yeah,
they just are, there's a script playing in their minds of what they think I'm saying, right? And it was like, oh, done with that, not going to entertain that in my
mm,
space because it's a commitment of mine now to be able to like have people around me that I can really hear and that really hear me and that we're
yeah,
all committed, as you clearly are, to
yeah,
this
yeah.
healing work, embodying
I
your
am
voice.
curious now, totally sidestep, but what is your human design now? I just need to know.
Gosh, I'm so bad with the numbers. I'm a generator,
Yeah,
and I have splenic authority.
yeah.
And I can't remember what my actual numbers are. I just remember reading about it. And like the minute, basically, like people see what they want to see in me. It's
Are
it's
you
one of
like a
those
six by
too.
chance?
I think I
Some,
might be. I think
yeah,
I'm a six
okay.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's like
I,
two types of this. And it even said like relationships are challenging in different things because you're like, why do all these people see me as, I don't want to say a savior because it's not that
that
at
is a
that level.
six line. I've got the six
Yeah.
line too.
Oh
I
my
hear
gosh.
you.
And then now it's shifting. Like I feel like people are coming in who more engage with me, but there was a long time with clients and relationships and everything else. I'm like, it would hit me too late. Oh, this person needs me to be something in their lives.
Yeah,
And me communicating isn't actually a part of that equation because it's not about me at all, or there's no capacity for me to even be like, I'm actually feeling this way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I resonate big time. That's why I'm like, hang on, what are you? I need to
Yeah.
know.
I'll look it up for you later, but
Okay,
fairly certain it's a six something.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. My curiousness just was like killing me. Okay, there was like another element I really want to like weave in here that I thought was so juicy in our messages. I wanted to talk about, and I forget, you'll have to refresh my memory in regards to like preparing for sex, intimacy, pleasure, the throat,
Oh,
right?
right.
Because I
Yeah.
want to delve into this a lot more because the types, because and this is going to be great to come off the last episode because I did speak about orgasms quite a lot and like our orgasmic potential, and the throat and the sound was such a key element in that. So I really want to weave that in because I talk about how the voice is this huge transmitter and like a vibrational release to release like traumas and wounding, but also for like embodying pleasure. So I want to kind of delve into that a little bit because I think it'll be so yummy after the last episode. Yeah,
Yeah. So I think the phrase I used in my message to you was singing for sex.
singing for sex. Yes.
Um, which is not to be equated with singing for your supper where you have to sing in order to get it. That is not what I mean. I mean like singing in preparation or like vocal toning, singing or chanting, things that really make you feel lush. Like, for example, the Song of Songs in the Hebrew Bible or in the Old Testament in Christian terms is an ancient, probably Sumerian or Mesopotamian sacred love text. And so there's
Yum.
like luscious passages in there that are beautiful and have a lot of like floral or natural imagery in them because that's how they did poetry back then. But they're really talking about the woman's body or they're talking about the experience of pleasure. Like I will take something like that and just pick a phrase or two that like is meaningful to me. I like to chant in Hebrew, but you could certainly chant it in English as well. Like and chant something like that because there's so much sensual encoding in those words. So
Mm.
something like that is great. Sometimes I'll drum, definitely dance, even though that doesn't necessarily involve the voice, but just help to open up. I mean, I have to say full disclosure, since we said this would be a raw and real conversation, like I don't have a lot of trouble getting in the mood. I
Yeah,
used to, not anymore, because the body and I were like, we're good. But
we're good.
let's say it's been a stressful day or like I just got a frustrating email or something like was delayed or whatever right before I know I may have the experience of needing to and wanting to relax and to experience pleasure, whether it's self-pleasure with the partner, then I know that these tools are going to be like, okay, let's ground, let's be present, let's feel the sensation inside our body with this because that's going to prepare us for, other sensations later.
Yes, absolutely. And when you tap into the element of like even just sort of humming, like humming and singing is like the
Mm.
number one thing we can do for our vagus nerve and like opening up our nerve system. Like I don't like to call it nervous system because it makes it feel like it's always nervous. I know it's
Nervous.
weird. Just the nerve
Yeah,
system, right? It's the nerve
yeah.
system. It's not always nervous. It can be calm. Um, and just like really opening up your body and like using your own like tone and sound, and it doesn't even have to be like chanting text and stuff, even though that is delicious and yummy too. Like something that's like really sacred and honoring to like you and your own temple is
Absolutely.
so delicious. And
Yeah.
yeah, I honestly am going to try this a lot more. Like I've done some, we've done some chanting and some like humming and opening of the vocal cords before we've gotten into it before. And it's been so powerful. And like, but that for
Mm.
me, that's a process that I actually continue while I'm having sex and like while I'm intimate and having my pleasure practices. That is a tool that I actually consistently, honestly, never shut off. And, I was
Yeah.
explaining on the last episode that like my orgasmic and pleasure potential the last few years has been otherworldly and insane. And I honestly believe it's because of my throat, amongst other elements, of course. But it has been transformational and it has helped me heal so much and
Yeah.
allow so much more vibrancy and life and authenticity of like who I am to be sort of born and seen. And like, I definitely think that is an honoring to like how I use my vocal cords and my throat through these moments of ecstasy as well as like grief, you know?
Totally. And it comes through in your content, by the way. Like there's
Beautiful.
just so much emotional expression and like honoring of emotion that comes through and the messiness of it as well as the beauty, like we get the whole package.
Yeah.
And so it's like I think honestly, like the more self-expressed we are is related to how orgasmically tuned in we are and vice versa. And it kind of just cycles and supports, a greater and greater opening. So
Yes, absolutely. That's so beautiful. I would love to ask, I feel like this is coming to like a sort of a natural close. So I would love to ask if there's anything else that you would love to share with the community about um the journey, like your personal journey, any snippet that you see like really feel sort of simmering up that you want it to be expressed before we sort of yeah, moving towards a natural close of the space.
oh, one thing is bubbling up that I feel like I should say, which we haven't really touched on, but relates to everything else. And that is if you can get out and use your voice, of course, in your body, because it's always in your body, on land,
Oh,
especially if there's a potent place to go and do that, or a place that feels potent to you. It
yeah.
might be a sacred place to a lot of people, or it might not. It might just be that it feels sacred to you. It's your backyard or something. Okay, I don't care. But if you can get out on land, especially if you can be barefoot, although I admit, like, I like to go to southeastern Turkey to do this in that particular place that I mentioned to you earlier. And I found out if I take my shoes off, I get bitten by ants. So that doesn't happen, unfortunately. But I have had more shamanic deaths and rebirths. Everything that I've rebirthed in my business came directly out of singing on that land. I met ancestors on that land. I've met spirit guides on that land. I've met powerful people in my life on that. I mean, all kinds of strange things have happened on that piece of ground. And I credit a lot of it to the fact that I just go out and sing. And sometimes, in relationship, you don't always want to be taking, you want to be giving too. So sometimes if you just go and say to the land, I have a song for you. Would you like to hear it? Oh my goodness, the land loves that. Like I can always just feel the rocks and the trees and the grass just soaking it up. Like somebody came to sing for us, and then there's often such an outpouring of love in return, and very often intuitive guidance will come through as like a sort of gratitude from the earth back to you for this gift. So um and hey, bonus, if you can go somewhere where nobody's around, then if you self-conscious about your voice, or you're just exploring it, well, the grass and the trees aren't going to judge. So
Yes, I'm so lit up that you brought that here. And I absolutely feel like this is a whole nother topic in and of itself. To be quite honest, I'm so
it
passionate
is.
about land work that it's
Yeah,
unbelievable. But singing to
yeah,
the land and speaking to the land is something that I do every fucking day. And like
yeah,
every day. Like I don't even care. Like and it's such an ancient, beautiful practice that I think we've forgotten,
yeah,
like
yeah,
singing to the land, like singing into the song lines, into the ley lines, like picking up the energy of the earth. And I love that. And I always offer, like, your voice is such an element of healing, as we have been discussing this whole time. And to offer that back to the earth and the land that actually holds us and embraces us and gives us life and breath is such a
yeah.
beautiful cyclical honoring. Like I believe I'll go pleasure on the land, like that's my offering
That
sometimes
too.
too.
That too. Yeah.
So they're receiving my voice and my pleasure energy as well. And honestly, what comes from that is just such healing and medicine, not just for me, but for the earth. And I really want to discuss this further with you. I really feel like this is like another whole topic that we can dive into with this
It is.
priestess
It
work
is.
and earth medicine work. But I'm
Mm.
glad you brought it here because it is really powerful. And even in that connection, like one of my favorite things to do, like you said, with the feet on the earth is like squatting on the earth, right? And opening up that whole core channel from the throat,
Oh
like,
yeah.
sitting, squatting, feet flat on the earth, squatting down. So your pussy is like in a line with the dirt and the earth, and just feeling that vibrational, like, magnetic shift within the earth and sort of breathing with it is such a powerful, powerful medicine. I end up usually howling and opening my throat as well, but that's definitely needed. Squat on the
Yes.
earth, women,
Squatting on
please.
the earth. And I love that you mentioned about howling. I mean, there's a term in the Middle East here. It's not really howling, but there's the ululating that women do. Sometimes it's part of grief practices. Sometimes it's part of joy practices where it's like in the back of the throat and then they just move
Oh,
the air really quickly. So that's really great. I have also gone out onto that land at times where something important to me had not worked out and I was just in grief, over like having to let go of that possibility. And I have just wept and screamed and groaned, like that deep groaning that comes when there's a lot of heavy emotion just moving through you. And, it's not a place that's super far away from people. So, but I was like, you know what, if someone hears me, I don't care. Like, I just need to give this to the earth. And it's always so kind to absorb that. Like that way, the sound is helping to pass something out of your body that you don't want to be stuck in your tissues. It needs to be expressed. And then the earth is just kind to absorb it.
oh, this was like honey. This was like medicine. Honestly, I'm just like, my heart is so full. I know everybody that is going to listen to this, they're going to get so much like wisdom and like internal remembrance just from hearing your medicine and your voice. And it was such an honor to have you here. And yeah, I'd love to have you back, obviously, to talk about this. I know that they're going to be like, oh, everyone talks to me all the time. You need to bring in more earth medicine stuff. And I'm like, yes, yes, it's coming. Like
Yeah.
it's part of women's work. Absolutely. But yeah, I would love to like extend my heartfelt gratitude for you saying yes to even showing up and doing this. It's been such a pleasure and such a yummy deep dive. And I would also love for you to share where people can find you, how to work with you, all of those things. I'll share all those links before we say goodbye on the thing. But yeah, but I'd love for you to share all of the ways that they can find you.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you. And this has been such a joy. So thank you for holding this amazing space and like just the way you pace everything. And you get this work, and I so appreciate that.
Yeah.
For those who are wanting to connect in some way, you can find me on Instagram as at Lisa Moriah Speaks. And Morea is Moriah, like Mariah. So Lisa Moriah Speaks. Um, my personal website is lisamoriah.com. The school site is schoolofdivineradiance.com. And all the courses and workshops, anything that's available now or has been available in the past is there. I've been amassing this collection
Yeah. Yeah.
of stuff. And then you can also find me on YouTube. Speaking of speaking, there's lots of content on YouTube now at Lisa Moriah Speaks as well. That's the name of the channel. So
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm sure that they will love you and connect with you. I'll share the links when I share everything. And until next time, thank you for tuning in. And yeah, enjoy your little dance with somatic sound healing and how that can alchemize stuff within your own being for, deliciousness.
yeah.
Bye.